Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Ralph World. I'm Mac, and with me, as always, is
Uncle Britt.
And today we are going to be talking about Avatar: The Last Airbender. We're going to touch on the original series. We will talk a little bit about the movie, but the majority of this is going to be obviously the new Netflix show. So let's just get this out of the way as well. If you haven't seen it yet,
Spoilers.
right, there's definitely going to be spoilers involved here. So if you...
Kind of odd you'd click on a video with the title about a show you didn't watch, but hey, we ain't judging.
Thanks for the listen. So, what we're going to be talking about is we're going to touch on the original series a little bit. Like I said, we may talk about the movie a little bit, talk about how we thought about, or what we thought about the new Netflix series coming up to it, and then what we thought about, because we finally actually, we were a little behind everybody else, but we finally were able to get the whole series out. We purposely wanted to watch it together basically for this.
Mm-hmm.
So like I said, the first thing we're going to talk about is our relationship with the original series. And Britt, I'm going to let you take lead on this because I feel like the original series is much more sacrosanct to you than it is to me. I'm not saying I didn't like it, but this is a rare instance where you were actually exposed to it long before I was. I didn't see it when it first came out.
So, strangely enough, because I did grow up watching this. I didn't I wasn't there for episode 1 or anything. I think I came in somewhere at the start of season 2.
Okay.
But I did grow up watching this for the most part. And even when it ended, I still went back and watched the show. But I do think it's worth noting that I never saw the last episode of this until I binge watched it. Wow. I could not find it anywhere. I knew what happened because someone gave me like a plot rundown of the episode, but I couldn't see it for years.
That had to suck.
It did, dude. It did, because I got to like the very end of the fight.
Oh!
Yeah, but...
Oh, man.
But for me, coming from essentially being raised on it and you just deciding one day to sit down and binge the whole thing...
Yeah, deciding. Yeah.
being persuaded to watch, I have watched it in full since growing up with it, and I've gotten different things out of both times watching it, but the original, to me, at the very least, it was just a very fun show with a lot of people who could do bending, and it was cool, and the animation was so vibrant. But at no point did I ever feel like the show ever talked down to you. Like, the themes that it was telling sometimes were too intense for me to understand at the time.
Okay.
But just watching it, I'd be like, like people are actually having real issues in this war. Like,
Yes.
he won't remember this, but the whole thing with Jet and having to die, either kill a village or not kill a village, and like...
That's what we're going with?
Yeah, we're going with Jet.
Okay.
But like just that one episode where Katara has to make the decision of letting him do it or not, like that is such a weighted question and weighted decision to look back on. When I watched that episode as a kid, I was like, oh yeah, come on, Katara, save the people. Simple math here. Just save them. But it's like these people aren't innocent either. No part of these of the factions are innocent. Then, not to get into the whole lore of it all, but just that small example to me shows how much I originally got invested in this world, in this franchise, in these people, and I was like 14. Like, I think the next biggest thing I was concerned about was like Legos. They didn't have a plot.
For me, the series ended in 2008. I knew about it. I had heard about it, but for me, when it was going on, when the episodes were airing, for me, it was Nickelodeon, and I grew up. Nickelodeon's the kids' network, okay, and that's fine, you know. It was Nickelodeon and Disney. That's fine, and I thought it was just like a kids' cartoon, and
which it looks like one.
Yeah,
Like,
it does.
If you know nothing of topic or theme and someone was just like, hey, look at this. Oh, that's a kid's show.
Yeah, I mean, especially like when you consider like the heroes are all children, like
Yeah.
especially when you look at Aang, like with that shorn dome and that baby face and everything. It wasn't until, God, I want to say 7 years ago that I was persuaded to sit down and watch it, and then I ended up binging it over like a week maybe. And I think that's another reason why you and I have different views on it. I don't have nostalgia is a theme of this show. I don't have that nostalgic grab towards it. I didn't grow up with it. I didn't even have to wait. I just it was on Netflix. I just binged the whole thing in a week.
Yeah, surprise, surprise. You got to see the last episode after you saw the one before it.
But even that, like, I've only done one complete watch through of it. And it's not that I don't want to watch it. Like, I've gone back and I've watched other episodes now and then, but like for some reason I just haven't sat down and completely binged the series again. And it's funny because he brought up Jet. The reason I was like, I said, are we really doing this? Is because, just to jump ahead a little bit, when we were watching the Netflix series and Jet showed up, I asked him, I was like, who's this guy? And he said, that's Jet.
Dude, I went through the major plot points, man. Like Ba Sing Se, stole Appa, blah, 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 blah.
I have...
This man literally made a plot that cut out Jet that made the event still work.
I have no memory of Jet whatsoever. And it's not like I looked him up and said, oh yeah, that guy. It's not like he explained these things and I was like, oh yeah, that guy. Jet does not exist in my head, because when he was talking about Ba Sing Se and about Appa being stolen and about how, what was it, Jet found Appa or something? Like, see that? I don't even remember. In my head, Appa just wandered off and got lost. Jet, like, I remember the episode differently that just erases Jet from continuity, but Slate, like Britt said, still makes it work.
Yeah, this one kind of amazes me, guys. Like, I was confused. We paused the episode for a little bit because I needed to understand.
Because he was like explaining Jet's plot points and like the episodes Jet was in, and I'm like, yeah, I remember that episode, but that's not what happened. And he's like, he said, what are you talking about? And I just started explaining storytelling, and he's looking at me like I'm crazy, going, that's not what happened.
He just made up an episode of Avatar. I don't...
But so that aside, I also, there are things that happened that like I either don't remember the order they happened in, or I remember them just a little differently, Jet aside, and then like you would bring something up and I'd be like, oh yeah, that is how it happened. So like it wasn't, and I think it's because I didn't grow up with it, and I think it's because I didn't have to wait from episode to episode that I could just consume everything all at once, that like nothing really sunk in other than like the water bending, the earth bending, things like that. There was all of the action, and I do remember the characters, and I like the characters. There were some whose name I couldn't remember until we started watching the Netflix series again. Like, I didn't want to tell you this at the time, but for the life of me, I could not remember Suki's name until she showed up in the Netflix series, and I was not about to tell you that. I remembered who she was. I want to make that very clear. I just couldn't remember her name.
So the opposite of Jet.
Yeah. But yeah, I never saw it as this, and I don't know how many people, well, it has a very strong fan base, so I assume there's a lot of people that see it as like the end all be all, that like this is like one of the greatest shows that have come out. And I do have to admit that like what I do remember, especially the action in the anime, we'll talk about the Netflix series in a minute, but in the anime, the bending, especially like Zuko and his fire bending, is just breathtaking in the way that they animated it. It was like, I think that is what put me over the edge, going, oh, I get what they're doing. That when I first watched it, and I watched the first couple episodes, I'm like, this is kids, like this, I still see this as a kids show. But then when the firebenders showed up and just started firebending, and Zuko was like kicking fireballs at Aang, and burning like an igloo village, I was like, oh, I get it now.
I needed that taste of almost innocence, and then they ripped it away from me.
I'm down with that.
Yeah, I know you are. You grew up in the 80s. We watched a lot of 80s kid stuff.
So there's a theme. There's a theme that I follow. So honestly, like, and that kind of takes us into the next topic, because this is something else I've never told you about, and probably the reason I also didn't watch the show. And I'm telling you for the first time, my first experience with Avatar: The Last Airbender was the movie.
No. You have told me that before.
Oh, have I?
Yeah.
Okay.
You waited till we finished watching the live action. But yeah. That being your first interaction with this IP altogether,
I feel like
understand.
Shyamalan owes me an apology.
Personally, yes. I think he owes all of us an apology for Ong. But so you have two different sides coming at this show. Someone who grew up with it, someone who watched it after the fact as a complete entity. Mm-hmm. And for the record, we understand Legend of Korra is a continuation of this, but we are just talking Last Airbender for this.
Mainly because I've also never watched Legend of Korra.
I haven't seen all of it.
Okay.
Maybe next time.
I don't know, it's just something about Legend of Korra that, like, I almost feel like I've seen it before because of Avatar. Like, how different can it be? And I know that's a stupid question to ask, but I don't know. There's just something about it that I feel like it's not going to be better. You know what I mean? And not that it's going to be bad, but I don't know. There's just something that, like, I have no real urge to see it. Like, I would probably sooner binge Avatar a second time than turn on Korra. And I don't know why.
To my understanding, one of the biggest issues with Korra is the fact that they would never commit to more than one season at a time, or they wouldn't let them commit to more than one season at a time. So a lot of character arcs and plots kind of got condensed.
Okay.
And then it was like, oh, we do have another season? Okay, what are we going to do with this one? Like, they had vague ideas, but...
Okay.
But we're not here for Korra. So you grew up on this IP that is really well liked. It has really good animation. It's something that is holding quality over time, which not a lot of things do.
Mm-hmm. Especially at that time.
Like, especially a kid property at that time.
Like, I feel like in the early 2000s, anime aside, in the early 2000s, we were coming out of it, but we were still kind of in the realm that American animation was very episodic. It wasn't meant to carry on these long story arcs. Because honestly, like, anything that came out of animation at that time, you had the attempted reboot at the Thundercats, which was supposed to have, it was Cartoon Network, and it was supposed to have an overarching storyline, but that didn't make it past the first season. You also had Masters of the Universe, the 2022 series, that it did have a overarching, like, meta plot that I think it lasted 2 seasons, and then it got canceled. That, like, this was the era where, like, they were still feeling it out, and it didn't feel like anything was succeeding except maybe this. And I think it's because, having watched Thundercats, having watched Masters of the Universe, and this may be slightly contrary to the point of this show, it didn't rely on people that grew up from the 80s.
Yeah.
It was something new. It was something that a lot of people could get into. It's something that kids could get into. It was something that adults could get into. Whereas, like, Thundercats and Masters of the Universe was not the powerhouse that it was in the 80s, and it wasn't the pop icon that it is turning into now. It was in that zone where, like, it was kind of starting to be forgotten, but this was trying to revitalize it. So it didn't, like, I don't think it, like, really grabbed the audience that it was looking for. Thundercats would have been the same way. and both of them were Cartoon Network. And for this to come out on Nickelodeon during the day, I think it found a much wider audience, and that's why this succeeded, where like a lot of those other ones that were attempting to do something like this failed.
I also think with Avatar, it was very simple. Like, no matter what episode you jumped in on, you might not know the exact context of what's happening, especially if it's the later season. But, I mean, the opening of every episode literally sets you up with exactly what you need to know. There's 4 nations, there's 4 elements that you can bend, there's one person that can bend all of them. You get what's going to happen when the episode opens. And so, it wasn't necessarily that every episode was self-contained, but every episode was easily watchable by itself. Like, there wasn't just, oh, there's this really dark episode, or there's just the beach episode. Each episode had ups and downs to it.
And they also did a really good job of, so much that, like, you may not have noticed it, but I did because I was binge watching the whole thing. In every other episode, I'm looking for a waterbender, or I'm looking for an earthbender. Like, he repeated his mission like every other episode, to the point when I was watching, I was like, okay, I get when this came out, there was a week between each one of them, but I'm really tired of hearing him say this. But I think that helped, like, if you jumped into the middle of the series, you kind of knew where it was. Whereas something like Dragon Ball, if you tried to jump into the middle of Dragon Ball Z, you got no idea what's going on. If you like just jump into the middle of the Cell Saga or something,
you turn on the episode and it's just Goku going Super Saiyan for the first time. And you're just, what's happening here? That small bald child died and now he's got yellow hair. What? But so you have this show that people like, that people have really gravitated towards, and it's a little old at this point. And then you hear news that they're making a movie, a live action version of this show that you just love, right? This beautiful animation and distinct fighting styles and action and comedy. And you had kids, you had adults. It covered so much. And then you get one of the, at the time, one of the best directors in Hollywood, M. Night Shyamalan, to come in.
Not even necessarily one of the best, but like definitely one of the hottest.
Yeah, one of the hottest.
Because he was coming off of a lot of hits at that point.
Like, he had Unbreakable, that's a superhero thing, so he kind of already had the feel for, like, superpowers and whatnot.
Sure.
And this man comes in, writes a 10-hour script, doesn't understand what a movie is, apparently, and then what we got out of that 10-hour script was the movie we all know and love.
That movie was...
Ong!
There was no comedy in that movie.
It was so serious.
It was so dry. The bending was atrocious. Like, we keep talking about that one scene with the earthbenders, where you got like 6 earthbenders doing
in a triangle, in formation,
doing a kata, and like a rock the size of a bowling ball just levitates and doesn't even hurl towards
it doesn't move with any haste. It looks like someone put it on a string and then they just pulled it in front of the camera.
And like, you're left wondering, why don't the firebenders just move?
Why doesn't someone throw a rock?
Like, well, first of all, why are the firebenders able to contain the earthbenders on land?
Yeah.
Like,
why can't they produce fire? Why?
I know that was a big thing for you.
Well, why do they need a flame to be a firebender? You know, fun fact, in the show and in the books, one of the things that almost every firebender is born with is a spark in their eye. They're born with it. Like, they're literally born with fire within them, but they need a light. They need a light to fight anything in this universe. This movie sucks.
Whereas, like, in the series, when they, like, it made sense how they were able to contain the earthbenders because they kept them on a boat. And this was before metal bending was even something that was
before
talked
Blind Girl felt earth within metal, they were stuck there.
and then explained why they needed help breaking out. Not because they were kept in a mountain fortress.
Man, we're surrounded by all this earth. If only someone could bend it. Why don't we just douse their flames and then they're useless?
Ozai was, and this is nothing against the actor. I want to make this very clear. The actor that played Ozai in the movie, I'm sure he did exactly what was asked of him. But in the cartoon, in the original series, Ozai is terrifying. This dude looks like he just walked out of a board meeting at Warner Brothers Discovery.
Looked a little bored.
Yeah. Yeah. And there was no real character, there was no real sense of drama, there was no tension. There was
almost no build within the context of what was happening.
No, there
Aang
wasn't.
came out of the iceberg, and then it was just kind of like, well, things just happened to them, and then they ended up places, and then some things happened. And then he was the Avatar at the end. Like, it just... There was no drive.
What cracked me up was, like, at the end, they were like, yes, you are the Avatar. We accept you as the Avatar. You can be the Avatar. And it's like, that's not how it works, bro.
No, it truly doesn't matter what you think. He's the Avatar. And we're not going to sit here and nitpick this entire movie. It's been done for a decade.
If you want a new Avatar, your options are wait for him to die or kill him now.
So you're telling me we can kill the Avatar? You can try. He's a master of air already at like 11. But one thing I'm going to mention, because it's going to come back in the live action, is they ruined Zuko's scar. They completely missed the point of Zuko's scar. It's not just that he lost a fight. It's not just that he has a burn on his face. He is a firebender. He is the prince of the Fire Lord of the Fire Nation, which in the era that this show takes place is the strongest nation in the world.
He's prince to the world, basically.
Yes. And he got burned. The prince of the Fire Nation got burned in a noticeable place that cannot be hidden, and so much to the point that it actually impairs both his eye and his ear because of how burned they became. It's not supposed to just be this little thing around his eye because he got in a fight with his dad and he lost. That is such a shallow view of the events that happened to Zuko that you completely undermine most of his redemption that comes after it, because you do not understand what he's even being redeemed from. So they ruined that aspect of Zuko in the movie. But the movie comes out, and we loved it. It was great. All of us who grew up on it really latched onto it, really loved the blue people. But man, that IP needed to die for a little bit, and it did. Well, except for the books that kept coming out, which I'm not sure how many there actually are, but I know there's like at least 5 coming out of just like other avatars.
I know there's 2 for Kyoshi herself. They actually sell it in a box set for like $25 now, that I've actually been thinking of getting it. Cause
the Air Nomad one, Yen Chen, I think your name is, she has one.
Okay, but I really want to get that Kyoshi box set.
That's really cool that you mentioned that. But the Kyoshi one.
So that brings us up to last year. That brings us to last year. When word of this started getting out and the trailer dropped. Going into it, once again, and I think this is because like it's not as precious to me as it is to you, going into it, I watched the trailer. I thought this is going to be really cool. I liked the visual effects. I liked the bending. Like they showed in the trailer Zuko's flame kick. I was really all about that. This guy wouldn't watch the trailer.
I would not. I still haven't seen the trailer for this.
Oh, okay.
I wanted this to be good. Like, honestly, coming off the tails of, like, the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, which I don't necessarily hate, but I do understand a lot of the critiques with it. just a lot of shows that I was very excited for. A lot of Marvel stuff came out, and I needed a win. Like, I just needed a live action win, you know? And I was all for this. The creators were involved. Like, I was like, okay, this is going to be great. And then, I found out. My man who got cast as Uncle Iroh is the same guy who was in Kim's Convenience, another TV show if you haven't seen it, and he played a dad. And when I watched that show, halfway through, I even had the thought, this man kind of reminds me of Uncle Iroh. So I was on board with the casting from the get-go for that man. But once the creators left for creative differences on this project, I got very worried. Like, I genuinely thought Netflix was going to do it again, or Nickelodeon was going to do it again, and just ruin the whole property and not understand what it's about. Having seen it now, and I think I understand what a lot of the creative differences were, and it was abbreviation, to put it simply. I understand the conflict, but I also think they did a pretty decent job of keeping the themes and characterization, with a few exceptions, the same feel and same characteristics without necessarily needing to have all the exact same moments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when the trailer came out, I was really excited about it. I watched the trailer. I watched the second trailer. I watched Toph's reaction to the trailer. I can't remember what the voice actress's name is right now, but she did a reaction to it, and like, I thought that was kind of cool. And she's looking forward to season 2, obviously, or book 2, obviously. Mm-hmm. But I kept on trying to get you to watch it, and you were just like, I don't care. I don't care. I need this to be good. I don't want to see anything until it comes out. And I got that, but at the same sense, I was like, just watch it.
No.
And one of the reasons I wanted to do this episode and talk about this is because I am somewhat surprised, but also impressed at how the reaction to this show has varied across the spectrum.
Yeah.
Everything from they've ruined Avatar to this is the second One Piece. Like, Netflix nailed it again. Like,
But to be clear, no one has said it's worse than the movie.
No. But like, and there seems to be like everything in between as well. Like, sometimes when you get stuff that people say, oh, this is fantastic, or oh, this is crap, you end up with like a Captain Marvel situation where like people either loved it or they hated it, and there really wasn't much in between. With this, I do think people focused on the love it or hate it, but there's also like varying degrees in there, which to me is how a show should be viewed. Not everybody should love it, not everybody should hate it. For me, for the most part, I think I like it a little bit more than you do.
I think you do. I don't dislike the show.
Yeah,
I don't know
clear.
if we said that directly about the show. Neither one of us dislike it.
No.
We both are quite fond of the show.
Yes.
Do we think it is the next greatest TV show on earth? No. But
we are looking forward to the next season.
Yes, I am very much looking forward to it. I do hope they work on some of the critiques that we have with it, characterization-wise. Mm-hmm. But all in all, we walked away feeling good about having watched it and thoroughly enjoyed ourselves throughout the whole thing.
Yes.
Shall we get into our critiques of it?
Well, before we do that, and I think this will go into one of our critiques of the new series, is the feel of the show in general. And I think this is something we both agree on, that from the start, the feel of the show was kind of skewed because of how they started it.
Yes, 100%. Like I said earlier, in the original show, it was very much fun. It was kids being kids doing goofy things. Granted, the live action had to condense some things. You can't have as much side stuff going on. And I get that. But when you remove all that side stuff, when you remove the character moments and the bonding, you have to replace it with other moments that have to do more with less.
Right.
And in this show, they had the opening different. The opening for the anime started with Sokka and Katara on a boat, and then they find Aang in the iceberg. That's the opening. You really don't know what's going on. You just know there's a kid in the iceberg, and there's these two other people, and you think they're going to be friends. In the live action, it starts with the massacre of the airbenders, of all the nomad monks. And yes, that still happened in the anime, but it didn't start there. It started with childlike wonder. It started with innocence. It gave you a place to settle in the world, and then it shattered your heart later.
Mm-hmm.
But I truly think you need that beginning. You need that innocence. You need that, why is this bald kid in an iceberg? You want to start with questions that you can answer that have good answers. It's like, this is the Avatar. He's just an 11-year-old kid from 100 years ago. That is very whimsical to just say.
Yeah.
And then later when he has those moments of, this isn't my time, these aren't my people, everyone I know is gone, you realize the weight of those words that were said in the beginning, but you only get that now. In the live action, you get it right off the bat. You understand the weight of the Avatar. You understand that Aang is running from this. And when he gets out of the iceberg and he's with Katara and he doesn't acknowledge that he's the Avatar and everything, you get the impression that he's running from it instead of what you did in the anime, and you just felt like this was a kid. You felt like this was a kid trying to live his life and do things on a whim, and you were okay with it. You found out later he was the Avatar, and then you were like, oh, crap. This kid has a lot that he has to live up to.
And I think with the start of the Netflix series, by seeing what happened to the Air Nomads, by seeing what happened at the temple, by seeing what the Fire Nation did right off the bat, I feel like, and I may be reading too much into this maybe, I don't know, but like, I feel like you're more of an audience at that point. Whereas with the way that the Nickelodeon, the original series started, Aang comes out of the ice, and you're discovering this with him. You're going on the journey with him rather than knowing things he doesn't know. And as we keep touching on, there is a condensing of plot points in this, because you're taking like book one from the animated series that was like something like 20 episodes to a live action of 8 one-hour episodes. There's going to be a change. That's why it's called an adaptation. But I think this was, I don't want to say the only mistake, because it's not a perfect series. Like, let's just get that out of the way. But I think this was like the big mistake they made, because they robbed the viewer of getting to go on that journey with Aang and finding out. Like, you could still find out, like, because it's an hour-long episode, you could still find out, like, maybe at the end of the episode, because that, like, first 10, 15 minutes or whatever it was would have to get respaced somewhere. You know what I mean? And I think when I watched the first series, and there's this kid that comes up out of the iceberg, and he's being a goof, and they're doing penguin sledding, and they're doing all of this kid stuff, and then you find out what really happened, and you see his heartbreak, and it's like, this kid has no family now. And that's when it really leans into the found family thing. That you miss a lot of that emotional impact, I feel, with this, with the way that the Netflix series started. And I don't hate it, but I feel like if we hadn't seen the original, we may not be critiquing it the way that we are. But because we've seen the original series, and there's going to be a comparison to the original series, like, it opens itself up to it. You can't avoid that.
Even as bad as the movie is, we still need to talk about it, because it is a massive part of how the series got made to where it's at today.
Because it worked so well before, and I get that they wanted to try and do their own spin, but this wasn't the place to spin.
And even if you want to make the argument that they wanted that in the beginning to establish Gyatso, Gyatso gets established in the show.
You know what?
He just gets established later.
That was something else I was going to let you take lead on, is to show what happened to the Airbenders, but not what Gyatso was actually capable of. Go ahead.
Dude,
go ahead, take it.
Okay. I actually didn't remember this point, but I'm glad you brought it up. In the live action, it shows the air nomads being raided by Fire Lord Sozin. And they're just literally wiping them out, killing them. If we didn't say it yet, the live action has a bit more of a mature tone to it. Like, it straight up just shows people being fully murdered by flame.
Yeah, in the anime, like, it was always like, well, is he just knocked out? No, in this, dead.
Yes. So this all happens, and then the events are the same. You know the air nomads are going to be wiped out. You know Gyatso is going to be wiped out. And he does. He has a final stand. They get to him, and he dies protecting kids, which, very noble, very nice. In the show, however, it gets confirmed, or maybe in the books, but one or the other, it gets confirmed that how Gyatso went out then is he got as many Fire Nation soldiers into a room with him as he could, and then he took all the air out of the room and suffocated every single one of them, including himself.
Because how do you fight fire? You suffocate it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, like, that's the pacifist, like,
Yeah.
peak. I'm not going to fight you. I'm simply going to remove the air.
And that's why... And when you brought this up after we watched the first episode, I had completely forgotten that, yeah, when Aang walks into the temple and he finds Gyatso's skeleton, it's surrounded by all these empty suits of armor.
Like, everyone else kind of had armor strewn about. You could tell it was a fight. It was deliberately made to show Gyatso surrounded by armor.
Which, if you're going to show the fall of the air nomads, how do you leave that part out?
No.
Like, and I get, it's like, oh, he went down defending kids. Yeah, that's fine. That's great. We know kids died during this. Like, they even showed that to a certain point before they got to Gyatso. Let him do it.
Yeah.
Like, you want to set the tone?
You straight up see the one guy kill Katara's mom. Like, not a flash of light. No, the dude just full on burns her, and then we cut. We could have seen Gyatso straight up suffocate a bunch of people. But I'm sorry.
No,
that being one of my two biggest criticisms with the show is how it opened, and then the other one just being the removal of Sokka's sexism. And I do kind of feel like this is beating a dead horse. A lot of people have talked about this. It's been addressed even before the show came out because they openly said it was something they changed. The plot line that happens in the first season, both in the anime and the live action, perfectly creates a narrative for Sokka to learn and grow, because he is constantly put in the path of a more capable woman than he is. And it's not always fighting. Maybe it's like, I can't remember the name, but she becomes the moon. She was a very important leader. She knew how to inspire the people around her and how to talk to the little kids. Like, you had a whole built-in arc of Sokka starting one way, being exposed to the world and other people and other views and other cultures, where he himself grew out of a belief he didn't even necessarily fully understand why he was behind it.
Yeah, and that's something that I think when people were talking about Sokka's sexism and the showrunner said they didn't want to get into that, I think you can have a character that is sexist without being misogynistic. And I do think Sokka fell into that, because I never for once thought he was misogynistic. It was the way he was brought up. It was the community he was brought up in. Women stayed at home, took care of the village, took care of the children, while the men hunted and fought. that's not his fault. But when you took that away, you lost a lot of real character development, because from the time he meets Suki up until, like, I think her name's Yui, I can't remember, the princess. Princess Yui, yeah.
Oh.
Princess Yui, like, there is a direct line between those two of, like, how he interacted with Suki versus, like, how awkward he was with the princess. But then also you got to see how much he changed when he pretty much backed Katara going against Paco.
Which you have a character that remains sexist
In the Netflix show, yeah.
the same way he was in the other show, but Sokka couldn't keep that same trait.
I know. I don't understand it. I think removing the sexism from Sokka was a mistake. That you lost a lot of character building. You lost a lot of more interesting plot points, because my boss, we talked about this after we finished watching the series, her and I, and she was talking about it, and I told her that one of our gripes was Sokka. And she said, why? And I mentioned the sexism, and she kind of rolled her eyes, and I was like, hear me out. And I explained how things played out in the show. And she said, I feel like we just got robbed of something really interesting.
And that's what kind of baffles me. The overarching plot of the season didn't change, or of book 1 didn't change.
Mm-hmm.
So Sokka was still put in all the exact same situations.
With little development.
Yeah, all you did was remove the weight of those situations for almost no reason. Because there was no payoff for him not being sexist.
And I didn't... You remember when we watched that episode, and Sokka was down by the river, and he was throwing the boomerang at the melons, and Suki showed up, and she threw the fan, and then she started doing the poses, and I looked at you, and I was like... Because I hadn't heard this before we watched it, by the way. You told me that. And remember I said, wait, is she flirting with him? And then that's when you told me that they got rid of the sexism, so they're going straight to the relationship. It's not earned at that point. Because, like, when he left the village in the anime, there was kind of something starting between them, but it didn't really sink in until she showed back up in, like, book 3 at the end of the, like, when she became part of the group and she saw what he became, you know, with the full-on wolf's head on and everything. And, like, it all started with her and it came back to her. And it's like, you kind of took away, like, the one earned relationship in the whole show.
But for the little bit that they did put in, where it didn't really come off as sexist, but it did come off as kind of a very overprotective big brother.
And there was a little bit of macho in it, too.
Yes.
When she was basically showing him up.
And there was a payoff to that. When you do get to the end, and like you said, Sokka is kind of giving that little speech, and Katara is listening to it, is just like, Sokka, do not try to talk me out of this. And Sokka's like, what? No. Beat him, dude.
Yeah.
Beat his...
Yeah.
And and that kind of leads into the chemistry of this cast. I have next to no complaints with.
No.
Like I already said, my man Iroh nailed it in my opinion. But his chemistry with Zuko, you nailed it in the beginning. It doesn't feel like it's there when you start, and it's very intentional.
Yeah.
Because we even had to take a pause and be like, you know what? In the show or in the anime, it started this way too. Zuko was very one-dimensional. He was very much just, he's the villain of the show.
Yeah.
He's out for revenge for some reason. And then Iroh was really just kind of a wise mentor to Zuko. Like, it really didn't go much beyond that in the beginning. But then you get, 2 episodes in, and you start having those moments where they have to confide in each other.
The thing that turned us over, and I remember us sitting here watching it, I remember like 2 episodes in, it may have even been the third episode, I can't remember, but I said, we were talking about the casting, we were talking about the chemistry, and I had mentioned something that I was going to say I'm not real impressed with Zuko so far, but we're not supposed to because his arc comes later. They're focusing on the team. Like, I liked Iroh, I liked him and Iroh together, but Zuko wasn't really impressing me too much. Until they got to that episode where Zuko went and rescued him from Omashu.
Yeah.
And they're in the boat, and he's paddling away, and he sees Appa flying overhead. And Iroh says, Zuko, what's wrong? And Zuko says, nothing, Uncle, let's get you home. And he starts paddling away. And it wasn't because of that scene. It was because of what happened earlier in the flashback in that episode. We were not ready.
Dude,
Yeah.
they pulled leaves from the vine out really early.
We were not ready for that. But that scene where Zuko walks up to him, does the royal thing, does the thing that's expected of him, walks away, and then comes back, has that moment with him, and then he sits down next to Iroh, and that one tear rolls down Iroh's face, and Leaves on the Vine is playing in the background, and the portrait of his son looks almost exactly like... We were not ready for that, man. And like after that episode, I remember like we were just sitting in silence watching the credits, and I just said, everything I said about Zuko, I take it back.
Dude, this is a small thing to notice, but it carries a lot. Iroh doesn't say a single thing in that scene.
I know.
He is just sitting there with the casket next to him, and he is reacting to everyone as they walk past, but he's not really there. Mm-hmm. He's really not reacting or emoting to anything.
Including his brother.
Yeah.
Ozai.
It's only when Zuko actually talks to him as another person, as someone who is grieving, that Iroh even really acknowledges the room. And he only acknowledges Zuko.
Yeah.
Dude, it was a hard scene.
Yeah, it was. And it was fantastic. They pulled it off so well. And that's going back to the anime episode, or going back to the anime. The Ba Sing Se episode where they did that vignette, Leaves on the Vine, he sang it. I remembered watching that, not realizing that was Mako's last. And I don't know if it hit you the same way, but like Mako, like I saw a lot of his movies growing up in the 80s and the early 90s. Like I knew who he was, and like I knew he had passed. But then when like he was doing that and they did the honor in honor of Mako, like that hit me. Like when I was watching it and I realized this is the last thing he did, like that hit me. That hit me hard. So like, and I know you had an emotional reaction to it, but I think we took it from two different...
Yeah, because I didn't know.
Oh, okay.
I don't even know if I've seen anything else Mako has done, at least consciously.
Okay.
But yeah, man, that... I obviously didn't know when the very first time I saw that episode, I didn't know the context.
Yeah.
I didn't know who Mako was. I didn't know the significance of the song. I didn't learn any of that until after the fact.
And by the way, having grown up with him, I know I'm pronouncing his name wrong. I know it's like in my head, I know it's Mako, not Mako.
Oh.
But in the 80s, we didn't have the internet. That's how I've been saying it my entire life. So I apologize. I know I'm saying it wrong. I just can't break that hurdle. But no, when I saw that, like that kind of hit me, because he was very much into... I'm surprised that you haven't seen him in any of the movies, because he was very much involved in like a lot of like the 80s fantasy genre movies that we've watched. So like he was actually in both Conan movies too, with Arnold. So like, yeah.
Did you know that the performance you knew was his last thing. Did you know that the last thing he like actually recorded was that song?
Yes. Not at the time, but now I do. Yeah.
Like like they couldn't even record it again because his voice, like it was just so gone. So the one version we have in the show where he is breaking and everything, dude, it hurts.
Yeah.
And I respect the live action for continuing the tradition that is Mako's song.
Yeah, he didn't sing it. He didn't try to sing it, but hearing it into the background, man. Because I didn't know it. I was so focused on watching Zuko and Iroh that I didn't realize it until you said I wasn't ready for Leaves on the Vine, and then I heard it, and I was like, "Why did you tell me that?" I'm thinking in my head, "Why did you tell me that?"
You could have kept that to yourself.
But
that was one of the 3 like big sad moments to me throughout this. It was that. It was the one you really like when Zuko gets back on the ship after the whole crew finds out that they were the
the
squadron?
421st or whatever
Yeah.
it was, the squadron, the 41st or something.
And that he wanted to save, and that essentially he triggered his entire downfall for. And what is it? Our captain has returned.
Our prince has returned, and they all just lined up and like they're honoring him, and Zuko has no idea what's going on, and Iroh is just like, let it happen, like, and he had no idea, and I was like, this is fantastic, because like the way that he acted that out, the actor, I mean, like really sold it, that like he did it, he knew it was what was supposed to happen, but like the way he left the crew, it's like, I don't understand why this is happening. And like, you could still see that there was this appreciation, there was this confusion, and like, he still carried himself tall. Like, I loved that scene too. I absolutely loved that scene.
But the one that is pretty much tied for me from the moment I heard Leaves on a Vine in this, is when Aang gets to talk to Gyatso after he comes back and everything. And it's right as Aang's trying to leave, and Gyatso stops him, and he just goes into the whole, it's not your fault. Don't blame yourself. You couldn't have done anything. Gyatso doing that without Aang saying anything, without Aang leading to any sort of thought that was an inclination that he even had in his head. Gyatso just knew.
Yeah.
Like, from the moment he died, he made the decision, I know Aang's gonna need me. I don't know how, I don't know when, but I know Aang's gonna need me. And that man sat for 100 years waiting for that boy. And he made sure, before Aang walked out of that room, that he had to get that guilt off of him.
And this, what we're talking about now, we kind of skipped over like the feel of it, and we sort of jumped right into casting. But just all of this, what we're talking about, like, I have to agree with what you said at the beginning of this part, that I really don't think I have any issues with the casting at all. I think they did a really good job casting not just like the main characters, but a lot of the side characters. Like, I thought Gram and Paco, like, even like those, like, I don't want to say one-off characters, but like, we're not going to see them again, really. You know what I mean? I thought casting them was really good. Ozai was awesome.
Dude. Look, I did kind of have a criticism that Ozai wasn't in the dark like he was in the show. But almost immediately, I understood. You're not going to cast someone to play a character that isn't going to show up until, if it's greenlit, like season 4.
Well, I think the other issue was that and this goes into something else we've been talking about, is how they're condensing a lot of plot lines, and how like one episode may be tackling like 3, sometimes 4 different plot lines altogether. That when you're doing this, you could stretch out. Like, I don't remember the anime, the original series, going back to the Fire Nation as much as it did in the first series, as much as they are now. And I think it's because, like, Didn't they even like introduce Azula way sooner than what she was in the series?
Oh yeah, Azula wasn't introduced until I think the end of season 1.
Yeah. So like they even introduced Azula sooner. So like I get it if they keep going back to the Fire Nation and they need to do that to like keep the Fire Nation a viable threat. Like I don't mind that he's not just lurking in the shadows because the other side of it is that's kind of a played out trope.
And it would be boring.
Yeah.
Like, just to watch, it would be boring. The reason it worked in the show is because you didn't need to see the Fire Lord.
Yeah.
Zuko was the villain.
Yeah.
You just then knew, oh, this guy is just, like, secondary right now.
Yeah.
This guy's the issue later.
Yeah.
But Ozai is built.
Dude.
Like, I'm not even trying to say that as a weird thing, but when that man derobed in the Agni Kai and everything, that was a built man going after a very small child.
Oh my, yeah. So like the whole casting I think is fantastic.
The only part of the casting that I have any reservation on is I want to see Azula more menacing, not as annoyed as she was in season 1, but I think that's very much just she wasn't supposed to be used in a military sense in season 1. And then right at the end when she was is the first moment that the second moment I actually felt, oh, she's a threat, not just Zuko's sister.
And I do think they're going to play into that when the second season comes out, that like she's running an army now, she has her own forces. She's heading up Omashu now, isn't she?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do think that's going to be something that's going to like change her personality, and maybe I don't know if they're going to have her go full on psychotic like she did in the series, but I definitely think that now that both of them know that Ozai was playing them off of each other, I think that is going to start to make Azula more aggressive, especially once she meets up with Zuko. And it's not, and her mentality is going to be, it's not going to be you, it's me. I deserve this. I also think that they didn't play up her lightning bending enough.
I disagree.
Like, she threw a lightning bolt, everybody went, oh, cool. And that was really it. There was like no explanation of why this was a big deal.
It wasn't in the show either, in the anime.
Yeah, but
like, lightning was not a big deal. Azula just did it, and then you later found out how intense of a technique it is, how risky of a technique it is. And it's only when Iroh starts explaining it that it's coming from this, like, sage old man that's like, yeah, you really shouldn't do this. You can just straight up stop your heart, but I'm going to show you how to do this. But when Azula does lightning for the first time, and I'm glad that she does it, she's the first to do it in both shows, that was the first moment I actually feared Azula in the context of the show. Was
really?
When she did the lightning.
Okay.
And it was mainly Ozai's reaction. It was his... It didn't seem like he had no reaction. It seemed like he was trying to not react to it. And that is what made me feel like, oh, she might actually have an inch here over him. Even though that man can 100% shoot lightning.
So, the casting we're down with. Let's just jump back real fast to like the feel of the show. Do you think it has the same feel as the anime? I know I said this after we were done watching, that like I feel like the feel of this Netflix series is designed like you grew up watching Avatar: The Last Airbender, the anime. This is like the grown-up version of that. This is made for the people that grew up after watching that. So I feel like it kind of has the same feel, but it's just, there's more mature tones to it. There's grittier tones to it. I don't want to say darker because, like, yes, people die, but I don't think that makes it a darker show overall. And
it's a very hopeful show.
And talking about dark, because like you talk about this a lot, that like coloring of movies and TV shows and bad lighting. I love that they were able to weave in these cartoon bright costumes and make them work, because it's just, this is the aesthetic of the world they live in. Aang's going to wear this bright orange gi. Katara and Sokka are going to wear these blues. Okay, like
and they committed to it.
Yeah, and the Earthbenders are wearing all of these greens. Like, the only thing I think that might have gotten darker is the Fire Nation's red is bordering on black, but I'm okay with that.
Yeah, there's very little red, and they removed any white.
Yeah, because like the masks were like a white silver, like they were supposed to be metal in the anime, and now it's just like this dark maroonish black red that blends in with the rest of the helmet. Visually, I think that looks cool. Sometimes, though, you kind of lose the detail of the masks until you get close up, but like I get why they didn't want to have like that stark silver in this like sea of browns and reds and everything. But it is really impressive to me about how they have made these cartoonish colors just, this is the world they live in. And the other one that really stood out to me was like, you know, when Zuko becomes the blue spirit, okay? And it's that bright blue mask with the white highlights.
And we can see it because there's no giant Troy Polamalu wig on.
Okay, sure. But no, you're absolutely right. We can see it. Like, and that was one of my favorite moments in the show. That was one of my favorite moments of the live action, that like they fought together. Like, this kind of goes towards like those more adult tones, or not adult tones, but like more mature tones, that they fought together. They got away. Aang saves Zuko. You can see he's considering leaving him behind. He saves Zuko. They have a conversation, and then Aang triggers the memories, and Zuko starts to get angry, and Aang has no idea why. Like, that whole dynamic between them was so well written and so well acted for a kid that's like 13. And then like for him to like have that like almost like heartbroken tone in his voice when he says, if this was 100 years ago and we weren't at war, could we be friends? Which we know is totally foreshadowing.
Yes.
But just Zuko blasting him and Aang pushing the boat away, and like, it was so well done. And it had weight, and it had gravitas. And it's between a 13-year-old kid and I forget how old the actor is. I think like he's in his early 20s. Okay.
You said like 23.
And they're carrying this scene that you would expect like De Niro and Pacino to be doing. You know
And
what
it's
I
just
mean?
them sitting in like a shack.
I know.
Like it's not even visually all that interesting.
Yes.
It's solely relying on their chemistry and interaction. And it's good. And it goes back to when I said, if you abbreviate things, if you cut things down and you cut out these small character moments, you have to replace it with something that is less but does more. And that's what this scene does. It establishes a connection that these two characters could have that they necessarily aren't ready for, and then they go their separate ways. Because this isn't the point of the story where they are together.
Right.
And it works.
And they've really managed to make the interactions between Zuko and Aang very interesting and very unique, because you have that scene in the cabin, but earlier, and like, I know the actor whose name I can't remember, the child actor playing Aang, I know he's involved in martial arts, but let's be honest, he's not going to be like a master at anything he does. But the way they've been getting around that, when he was fighting Zuko, the market fight was so interesting, especially when they got caught up in all of the linens and everything, and they were using the linens against each other to like wrap each other up in. That, like, there's always like a uniqueness to when the two of them would come together and butt heads, and I really liked that. And also the way that Iroh and Aang, every time they interacted, it was always between cells. You know, like there was always bars between them, and they had like these conversations and everything, and like
Very earnest conversation.
Yeah.
Like for Aang to fully understand that Iroh is one of his biggest enemies at this point in the story, the conversations they have do not at any point lead to that.
No.
It is very much like we are on the same page of two different books, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. If that made sense.
No, it does. No. I get what you're saying. Like, the writing I feel is very well done. There's some changing of characters here and there, but nothing that I feel breaks the characters. And it's just like little things here and there that, like, maybe in the anime he wouldn't have reacted this way, but because once again we're talking about a condensed plot line, they have to do it this way. There's really only two things in the condensing of it, putting the beginning of the series aside, because we already talked about that. There's only two things that I wish they would have done differently. One, I think, is just me. I'm not sure it bothered you as much as it did me. And I'm not even... And bothered is really a hard way of saying it. But in the two-part finale, when the Fire Nation came to the Northern Tribe, I just wished that in the penultimate episode, in episode 7, they had started talking about the moon spirit and the ocean spirit, and she would have taken Sokka to, like, see the glade, you know, the oasis and everything, rather than it just coming out of nowhere in the final episode. I would have liked a little bit more foreshadowing with that. And the other thing, it just flew out of my head, that, like, we both kind of agreed on, that we wish they hadn't changed during condensing it. Help me out here. What was it? What were we talking about?
General Zhao? Something with him?
No, not... Zhao's dead.
Zhao's irrelevant to this.
I couldn't wait for Zhao to die. That was... Yeah. And the way they offed him was so much more satisfying.
And, I mean, now that we brought him up, Zhao did a really good job. Like,
he knew what the assignment was.
He had to be just the tool.
Yeah.
And he was.
Yeah. Oh, I remember what it was. No, the Face Stealer.
Oh, yes.
Loved his portrayal. Loved the way that Takei voiced him. But taking away the whole, you have to remain stoic, that's such a cool plot line. And I get why they did it out of order, but like, that's such a cool plot line that I wish they would have found a way to incorporate
so tense.
That. Yeah.
Like, I would have liked to have seen that live action of him just...
Yeah. And they kind of did it, but there was no reason behind it.
It was almost like it was more reaction this time.
That it was fear. He was afraid of the thing, that, like, he didn't know how to respond to it. But, like, I wish they would have kept that in there somehow. Like, if he would have ran into Gyatso first, and Gyatso would have been like, don't show any emotion. Don't let him, like, don't let it show. Because that... I remembered watching the anime and I'm like, that is really interesting. That's something I haven't seen before. But other than that, like, the beginning and the end.
But other than the beginning and the end, there was a little bit in the middle.
But there was, I wouldn't say any of it was even, like, story breaking. It like, and even the things that we're talking about may not bother everybody. Like, this is just our critique of it. So, and I feel like my thing with the moon and ocean spirits is very minor,
because it does get explained.
Yeah,
it's just,
even my brother wouldn't do this.
Oh my god, just the lighting when it became red. Just it becoming red was cool. But what I thought was awesome is when they would firebend, all the lighting on everyone would change to I thought that was so cool, because every time someone shot fire, like, not only were they reacting, but now all the light kind of dispersed for a second, and then it came back.
And our buddy Ben, who I saw this past weekend, we were talking about this, and he said his...
Oh, has he seen it?
Oh, yeah. His, because he was a big fan of the original series too, but he said his biggest concern about the ending was, how do you do that water elemental without looking silly? You make it Godzilla.
Yeah,
like, that was brutal. And Iroh, you want to talk about Iroh's I let you do all the Iroh stuff.
Oh man, when that water titan just came bursting through, and everyone's talking about what it is, and or no, he was doing narration, right?
No, Zuko said, "What is that?"
Oh,
Zuko just looks up and sees the water element walking past and says, "What is that?"
that is wrath. Oh, Iroh. You're laying down bars right now, dude. That was wicked and so accurate because Aang is about to kill people.
That was the thing. Like, that was the other thing. Like, going back to what we were saying about how this is much more mature and there's heavy things. When he was the water elemental, like, it could be argued in the anime he pushed the boats back. Aang killed so many people. And you can't say he didn't. And I know people are going to say, well, he was possessed by the water elemental.
And he was.
Fair point. Doesn't change the fact that he killed so many people. And it was brutal. And the design of the water elemental, the close-ups of him when he was in it, when he was in the spray, watching him sink into the oasis and then come up as the element. And even Iroh was like, oh, we're out. We're gone. We're leaving right now.
Dude, Iroh wasn't playing around with that. Iroh saw that boy going up and water going around him, and he was out.
Yeah.
And then when Zuko was trying to argue with him and be like, well, no, we got to go back. And do what, Zuko?
Do what?
You want us to fight the god out there right now? With what? Fire against the water?
There's no moon.
There is no moon, and there is a water god out our door. We're surrounded by water and ice, no earth, no fire, because why would there be fire here? What do you want us to do, Zuko? We need to leave. But the Avatar, he's dead.
There's no moon.
The Avatar, Uncle, there is no moon. There is not a moon in the sky, Zuko. Is the sun going to come up tomorrow? I don't know. We need to leave.
We had a whole dialogue about this after the episode. But the water elemental, the design for him, the animation for him, like, there were moments where, like, when that giant thing came out of the shadows, and I was like, oh, somebody was watching King of the Monsters. Like, it looked fantastic. And please, if you're watching this on YouTube, and you have the ability, and because like on YouTube you can leave the comments. So if you can leave the comments, please tell us if we're crazy. But both of us thought that when he was possessed by the water elemental and they were doing the close-ups on him, was it just us, or did it look like they aged him up? Like, not an old person, but like a man. You know what I mean? Like,
and I won't say it was for every single shot of him in the Water Titan, but that first one where it was kind of zoomed at his feet and you saw the whole body,
yeah,
he looked older. Like
yeah.
At least 15 plus years older. Like, that man was in his 20s.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, I was going to say, like, he looked like he could have been, like, in his late 20s, early 30s. Like, early 30s. Early 30s. At, like, you know, what would be the peak of his power. You know what I mean? Like, I swear they aged him up. And I don't have a problem if they did.
No, it was kind of... It portrayed that this was out of Aang's power at this point.
Yeah.
That, like, if this deity possessed him and did, in fact, age him up like that, like, that's just to show how much power this deity had to put into Aang just to exist through him.
Yeah. And speaking of power, before we finish this, because we are at the end of the show, before we finish this, there's something we forgot about that we need to talk about. Kyoshi. Her showing up on the scene. Neither one of us were ready for it.
That was probably the coolest fight in the first season.
What I loved, at first I was like, I'm not sure how I feel about this. And then it happened, and I just stopped thinking that
I stopped
way.
concerning.
Yeah, I stopped concerning.
Simply put, I
am
stopped
over my
concerning.
conflicted feelings.
Yes.
Because, like, when the Avatar would bend in the series, and like we've said, the bending in the series can be breathtaking. but I don't feel like they ever portrayed it in the anime that it was portrayed in that moment where she like had water tendrils in the middle of a flame vortex. It wasn't just that she was bending water, then she was bending air, then she was bending earth, then she was bending everything all at once. She became like this force of nature that was right on the edge of losing control. And the casting for her was once again fantastic. Like, it just showed Kyoshi as like this unstoppable force of nature, this warrior. And I kind of really dig that it was her instead of her inhabiting Aang. And I know there is a debate online about like, what did they actually see? Did we see Kyoshi just for the like the viewer and they all saw Aang, or did they see Kyoshi? I think they saw Kyoshi, just if for no other reason, the way that Suki reacted to her when she showed up, and Zhao just being like, "Oh, we're out."
And actually, if they saw Aang do that, one of them, Katara or Sokka, would have come up to him and been like, "When did you learn to bend the other elements?"
Yeah, very good point. Yeah.
So, like, logically, there wasn't even a follow-up if it was Aang.
Yeah.
So it had to be Kyoshi. Debunking right here on Ralph World. Using logic and critical thinking.
Yeah. I just... Well, that was another moment that, like, when it came on the screen, like, we were both just watching it, and we, like, I just, at one point, I just said, "This is awesome." And I think you were like, "Thank God you said it."
I couldn't get it out. Like, I was just in the moment.
Like, I understand all the people that are like, okay, we need the Kyoshi movie now. Because, like, I do think you got the perfect casting for her. And now that we've seen that you can do that, why not?
Oh, I almost forgot. And I just want to throw this one on there. Going back to Zuko's scar. In the live action, I think they nailed it.
Yes.
In look, I think it looks correct. It engulfs the eye and it goes down. It could be darker, it could be a little bit bigger, but honestly, I did not have an issue with how it looked. It was very prominent. No matter what angle you were at, you saw that Zuko had a scar.
Yeah.
And that's important to me. Like I said earlier, it represents so much to his character. And when you see how he got it in this version, where Ozai is literally holding him down and everything, it just adds another layer to the whole thing. It wasn't that just Ozai burned him in the Agni Kai.
He basically branded his kid.
And it wasn't just that he did it. He made a whole point of consideration of just standing there before he did it over top of his son. And Zuko sitting there just begging not to do this.
Yeah.
Like, it was so good. And it starts Zuko on such a good path. And what they're doing with the squadron or battalion or whatever it's called.
Squadron, yeah.
I think what they maybe have removed from Zuko, I feel like they have added it in other ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I am so excited to see where Zuko goes.
That's something else that I think is important about this. That while they may have taken away little bits here and there, they've managed to fill in those gaps. Like, I know we mentioned we were upset about the removal of the sexism from Sokka, but they have managed to, like, he's still a growing character. I don't think it's going to be as interesting as an arc because, like, I think something else that they missed is being the only non-bender in the team, he needed that character growth. He needed that character arc. That was his journey. And now I don't think it's going to be quite as deep as it could have been. But we know books 2 and 3 have already been greenlit. Before we sign off, I know what I'm looking forward to the most in book 2. You might be looking forward to the same thing, but, like, what are you looking?
Oh, it's Toph.
Toph, yeah.
Everyone. It's Toph.
Don't even try and bury the lead on that one. Like, everybody's like, we need to see Toph Beifong and the boulder.
Fingers crossed we get Dwayne Johnson to play the boulder.
I don't think he'll do it.
Oh, 100% not.
No.
Maybe John Cena will. because you know he would play a parody of The Rock.
Oh my God, I hadn't even thought about that. Oh, that would be hilarious. This shockingly Caucasian dude doing a parody of The Rock. And he would 100% be like, yeah, I'll lose to the little blind girl.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. He'd be like, all right, how you want me to hit the stance? Butt up?
Yeah. Butt up.
Whereas The Rock would be like, all right, so what do you want to do? Like, me hitting the wall like that?
And be like, striking a pose when I'm in there. And no.
I'm knocking Top off the ring, right?
Oh, my
Rock.
goodness. Cena doing the boulder would be hilarious.
And you can't tell me that
He would ham it up.
in both real world and in context of the show, that is not, outside of The Rock himself, the perfect casting.
That would be awesome. Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
I have a dream cast now.
Who do you, like, I don't think... So something I like about the cast is that it's not heavy-weighted.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like the one playing Ozai is probably the most, if you want to say famous one. And I feel like he's not that famous to American audiences. The same way with Iroh. Like, I know he's been in things, but I don't think, like, he has that level of fame with an American audience. And I like that, that they didn't heavyweight the cast, that they just went with people that fit the roles, that it's almost, I shouldn't say almost, it's like the original Star Wars, where they cast a bunch of no-names. Like Harrison Ford was known, but he wasn't Harrison Ford at that point, that you could just get lost in, this is Luke Skywalker, this is Princess Leia, this is Han Solo, not this is Paul Rudd playing Ant-Man or things like that. You know what I mean? That I can watch this cast, and while I know I've seen Ozai in things before, he's just Ozai. He's not, he's the guy I saw in, you know what I mean? Like,
But they also cast well in the sense of, like Star Wars, you get these veteran actors to play these very obtuse characters. Like, Firelord Ozai is a very unique character in the world of Avatar. Most other characters are rather lighthearted to some degree. Even Azula does not come off just angry and foreboding all the time. Sinister, sure, but there's still lightheartedness to her.
Yeah.
She still is jovial sometimes. Ozai isn't. He is always stern. He is always on a warpath. He is always just not a part of that. And so when you cast a person that needs to play that, they have to be able to play that exact obtuse character but still be real. And then you have the same thing with Iroh.
Yeah.
You have to be this legend in the world of war and how you are ruthless and this war, I almost said war god, but not that.
oh, I love that they've already brought up the Dragon of Ba Sing Se.
But then you attach it that he's also really into tea all the time.
I know.
And like he's always trying to play games and he's very whimsical.
I really hope they're able to fit the whole he owns a tea house thing in there for a while. I really hope they can do that. And I really liked the interaction between him and the Earthbender when they were talking about Ba Sing Se, and like he was threatening to crush Iroh, and Iroh was just like, it was war. What did you want me to do? Like, I had a job. Your brother had a job. Like, what did you want us to do? What did you want me to do? So we both liked it. Like I said, I think I like it more than you, and I'm not saying you dislike it, but like I kind of like it a little better than the anime. Yeah, I know. Breaking news. This is the first time I'm telling him face to face because we're on camera. He can't hit me. But I do think I like it a little better than the anime, mainly because I like the quickness of it, the speed of it, it's more action, like the action takes place, it's faster, it's tighter, and you don't have entire episodes that's just drama. Like there's action and the drama, and like it mixes very well, where like sometimes I felt like with the anime we would go episode after episode of just like drama and build up and everything, and then you would have like an episode or two of fighting. And being a fan of Dragon Ball Z, I realize that's ridiculous critique coming from me, but
You mean the show that had literal 3 episodes of screaming for him to have a transformation?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. But what do you... So I'm assuming you still...
I still
prefer
like the anime more.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, one, that's a complete thing. This is part of a story.
Right. Well, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but like that, you just said that may be another reason why it just hit me, why I may like this better than the anime. Because like I said, I binged the anime. With this, like, I have to wait. Mm-hmm. And even though Netflix released it all at once, because of our schedule, we didn't watch it all at once. So maybe that's why I'm enjoying this one more, because it's new to me. There's an excitement to it of like, what's coming next, what's coming next. Whereas like with the anime, I was like, yes, I'm still watching. You know, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, please continue.
I very much enjoyed the show. I like the original better. Anything's better than the movie.
Yes.
Including
nothing.
Yeah.
Including if we just didn't get this at all.
If that just never happened, and then from 2008 to this show, I'd be all right with that.
Yeah.
But of the criticisms I have, and of the 2 ones that I think holds weight, at no point did they ruin my experience watching it. Mm-hmm. It really hung me up on the first episode.
I think that hung both of us up.
Like it really just, it bugged me because I'm having a hard time explaining it. Like it was almost like I couldn't let go of, I want the grounding before the intensity.
And I think the first episode, the conversation we had after watching the first episode, that was the one that kind of broke us out of, this is not going to be a one-to-one adaptation. Mm-hmm. We have to just accept that they're going to put a bunch of stuff into one episode. Because I don't know if you realize it or not, but that entire first episode, after seeing how it opened, you were like dropping critiques every 10, 15 minutes. Oh, so now we're just going straight to here? You know, like...
I did think they had him fly in the beginning. Like that wasn't me just being
weird.
Like
I
the way
that.
They showed Aang airbending, I was like, they're not just gonna have him fly.
No, he was just riding the air currents down from the tower.
I get that now.
He still had the glider, don't worry. But I think the first episode was like where we, in the conversation that took place between us, like we really had to like break our brains from, this is not one-to-one. This is an adaptation. There's going to be changes. There's going to be condensing plot lines. The second episode, I think, really set us on that path as well, that like there's going to be like 2 or 3 plots, like story elements taking place in one episode instead of like each thing having its own episode. The one that stood out the most was, we're going to Amashu, we're meeting the mechanist, Jet exists.
Yeah, Jet, the mechanist, Boomy. We went through a lot of characters that set up a lot for the future.
The tunnels.
Yeah.
But
that wasn't a major complaint, but I didn't like that Katara and Sokka were the ones in the Tunnel of Love, and that the lights literally meant nothing, but
I think it's good. I do think it's good. I think they succeeded. I think the fact that they've already greenlit not just the second season, but the third season,
yes,
so they'll be able to complete it, which I think is good for the showrunner and the writers, that they know we can go up to this point, we can do this, we'll be able to finish this. So I think that's good for them. I think that takes pressure off of them. And I think just the fact, because Netflix doesn't greenlight anything.
They cancel pretty easily. It takes them a while to greenlight.
And I think that the fact that they greenlit this so quickly is, we don't know views, we don't know ratings, quote unquote ratings for streaming services, and even when we do find stuff out, it's usually a year later. Like we talked about that with the DCEU, that like a lot of the streaming data that we have came out a year after it was out. But I think the fact that Netflix greenlit it so fast is proof of how much it's been watched and how much it has been viewed well. So I'm looking forward to season 2, book 2. I'm definitely looking forward to Toph Beifong. And not just Toph, but like even in the anime, I feel like season 2 is when it really picked up. Like when things really got interesting, when the team was complete and they were just on their own and they were doing their thing. Like
they became self-sufficient is what it felt like.
Yeah.
It was no longer, well, where are we going? We need to land here. We need to go here. We're stuck here. Well, we made it here. They actually seem to have purpose in where they're going.
And Aang began his journey because Toph started training him as an earthbender.
And Katara had got the confidence to do water bending enough to start teaching him.
Yeah.
Which, it was a cool little thing that Aang has to teach her how to bend, period, for her to learn how to water bend.
I do like that little touch because, like, in the anime, I think I remember she asked him for pointers and he said, I'm an airbender, not a waterbender. But I like how in this, he was like, I can't teach you how to water bend, but I can teach you how to bend. You know what I mean? Like, I can teach you how to get into that mindset, how to get into that mentality, how to, like, just let, like, the elements flow. So I appreciate that, like, she's not basically just learning on her own, that like it's a combination of the scrolls that Gram gave her and what Aang is feeding her. Then like
and just watching other people.
The
whole ice thing. She was
yeah.
Like, I saw an earthbender do this. And it's like, yes.
Yeah.
Already this early in the show, they're pushing the point of learning from each culture to truly master your own element.
Yeah, I forgot about that when she was shooting out the ice discs and she was like, I saw the earthbenders do this. That was a real nice touch too.
But all in all,
yes.
Excited for season 2.
Yes. So if you're watching this on YouTube, leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. If you're listening to us on Spotify, as always, thank you for joining us. You can find me at Brick and Tire on Threads, YouTube, and Instagram. Drop us a DM.
You can find me on TikTok. Pretty sure that's going to be gone soon. Uncle_Britt.
And as always, this has been Ralph World.
Ralph World.